Hey, Jonathan Peters here with Big Heads, Big Ideas. And I've been thinking a lot about thinking lately. And so when you think of your mind, how do you visualize it? How are you, what's a metaphor that you use? The ancient one that's still around and kicked around quite a bit today, yeah, but certainly going back to Socrates and Plato and all those folks, is that the brain is a muscle that we can exercise and we can improve upon as just like any other muscles. And so and that's still around. I have apps on my phone that say I'm going to get my brain's going to get younger and I'm going to be smarter if I play their game for just 2 minutes a day. But the reality is that's not really how the brain is set up. And then of course more recently the metaphor is the computer, because we've had computers around, so if computers work this way, our brains must work this way. Well, again, tons of research that shows that's not the case. So back in 1995, Andy Clark and David Chalmers published a paper called The Extended Mind. And the idea, the concept, their theory is that the mind does not stop at the skin and skull. That when we look at how humanity developed, how our brains developed, our mind was actually, it developed through interaction with the resources around us. Sometimes the biological people, so other humans that we interact with, and certainly our environment. And this is how our brains developed over time. So when they first came out with it, it wasn't accepted very well. The three journals rejected it, eventually got published. A little bit of derision there for about a decade or something. But in the last 10 to 15 years, tremendous amounts of research has shown that, yes, indeed, the brain interacts with the outside, past the skin and the skull. So I highly recommend Annie Murphy Paul's book by the same topic, because she takes all this science that's going on right now and then brings it down and makes it a little more practical. So what you will do is get a stand-up desk. Once you read her book, you'll be prizing the interaction you have with other people very, very shortly. If you've looked at some past videos, I talked about gestures. I got inspired from her. That's where I learned about the importance of gestures. If you remember the difference between sitting inside of a box and sitting next to a box, so our location and space. But the one I want to challenge you with today is one of the things she talks about is movement. So when I got to this chapter, I thought, well, this is pretty cool because I do fidget a lot and I like to move and move around the house, change different spaces and so on. And but specifically, she mentions Daniel Kahneman, so I recommend his book. Thinking Fast and Slow. So as a scientist, he studies these things, and so when he's on the Berkeley campus, he has a 4-mile walk that he strolls. He has found that at a 17-minute mile is the perfect pace for him to be thinking, to be processing, to be working through ideas. So think of that, he's outside at a relatively slow pace. So thinking about your workspace, how long you've been sitting on your butt, it's time to get up and move around. Because Friedrich Nietzsche said this, he said, sit as little as possible. Do not believe any idea that was not born in the open air and of free movement. So here's my challenge for you. Go out, take a nice leisurely stroll at around 17 minutes a mile, and think about how you can change how you use your mind in the workplace. Again, Jonathan Peters, Big Head has big ideas. Subscribe to this channel for when we come up with more exploration in learning and gamification.